Week 15, fantasy playoffs. We have made it, everybody. We've gone through over 3 months of action, injuries, chaos, trades, whatever it does. It doesn't matter no more. It doesn't matter. You've made it to the playoffs, and I hope that now that you're here, you're ready to take on the rest of your league and go ahead and fight for that championship. But that's why, if you're tuning into the show, we're here to help you out. Myself and, of course, my guest, Tip Major, we are here to try and figure out what are the waiver wire pickups that you're going to need in order to make it through these next few weeks. But, man, before we dive on into it, Tip, how you doing, man? You surviving in all your leagues? Like, how are
not all of them.
No,
not all of them, man. No, look, I'm not even going to sit on here and act like I didn't have a couple of 2-win teams out there this year.
It happens.
I would say I'm in a majority. I would say I'm over 50%. I'm sitting at right around 55% of my leagues making it. One of the big ones that I really had a goal of was the Scott Fish Bowl. I made it to the quarterfinals. I had a big week last week, man. Last week, I think most of my players just went off. I mean, I had Sam Darnold, I had Justin Jefferson, Chase Brown. I had a really good week last week. But yeah, it's week 15, Chris. It's crazy. It's amazing. And I'm going to tell you, the players out there, I know a lot of us are in multiple leagues, but the players out there that are in only one league and you're not in it this year, still take a look at it. Still listen to sites like FantasyLife. Still listen to those experts like Chris Allen, because they're going to give you nuggets on what you should probably do next year too, and maybe look out for some of those players for next year. So, you know, I know right now the playoffs are in front of us, but don't stop watching football. Keep watching it, because you might see some nuggets for next year. So that's the only thing I can say about, you know.
I completely agree, because a lot of the things that we're going to find out over these next few weeks and throughout the playoffs, I mean, they're going to have ramifications for the 2025 season. So it's not just going to be a complete blank slate once everybody comes back in July, August of next year. So I completely agree with you there. But of course, I mean, if you haven't tuned into the show, welcome. We appreciate y'all tuning in, especially at one of the more important times of the fantasy season. But here's how the show works. I mean, we'll try and dive into as much analysis that's available here on FantasyLife.com to help get the ball rolling. But of course, if you have any questions, I mean, drop them into the chat. I mean, we'll try and get to as many questions as we can over the next 45, 50 minutes or so we can at least help you get your roster set, whatever waiver discussion or waiver questions you might have, or even just roster decisions in general. We're not here just to make sure that you have your waiver set, but if you have any questions about the outlook of specific players over the next 3 weeks, what injury situations, whatever the case may be. I mean, Tip and I, again, like I said, over the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to try and get to as many questions as possible. So again, drop them in the chat as you come in. But first, I guess, Tip, before we get into all the questions, I do want to ask you, from a overarching standpoint, what are you looking at in terms of waivers this week? Who are one of your, I guess, top priority ads for week 15? Because I'm looking at the waiver wire article available here on FantasyLife.com from Kendall Valenzuela. Did an excellent job this week.
Great.
If we can pull that up for folks to take a look at, I mean, if not just the injury roundup, but just looking at some of the higher priority ads from the running back position, wide receivers, all that, please go ahead and check it out as soon as you can. But out of the group, I mean, whether it's Sean Tucker, whether it's Jalen McMillan, whether it's, I mean, any of the guys that might be available on the wire, if you're in a playoff spot, you're fighting for that championship, who is the guy that's sticking out to you the most as the guy you really want to pick up for week 15?
And I'm gonna be sincere here. It's Sincere McCormick for me, man.
You had to do it.
I had to. You know, look, Sincere McCormick, man. Like, I look at the body of work, right? And we don't have a big sample size, but in those 3 weeks, we have an average yard after contact of 14. So we're getting 14 yards in week 12, 43 in week 13, and 60. So his average is going up in his yards per carry. So it's after contact. So that for me has been something that you want to look at. He's got a good schedule coming up. The Sincere McCormick, for me, Coach AP even said it. He's one of those guys that he has good speed. He has good vision. He has a lot of the attributes that we're looking for in our running back. One of the things that he said was he was talking about he's not the first person that tackles him is not the first person to bring him down. And that goes in correlation with the yards per carry after contact. So, or the yards that he's getting after contact. So for me, it's Sincere, man. I really like, I like what I've seen from him. He's kind of a bowling ball type player, 5'9", 209. So he's not a big guy, but he's not little either, you know? So he's one of those players that I'm looking at.
Okay, I would agree with you there because it looks like he's completely rendered any work from Alexander Madison kind of useless in the Raiders backfield. So he's definitely on like the top of my board. But I'll ask you this. So Isaac Guerrero takes over for the duo of Jordan Mason, Christian McCaffrey, 49ers, so on and so forth. We see Guerrero go down not yesterday, but on Sunday with the foot injury. Sounds like he's going to be able to play. They have the short slate or the short week ahead of them because they play on Thursday Night Football against the Rams. Right. So if you had Isaac Guerrero, or even if you're looking at the 49ers situation, say, hey, maybe they're starting to jump up a bit, maybe they're trying to fight throughout the end of the season, is Patrick Taylor going to be one of those guys that you want to add, or are you just trying to stay away from that entire situation, just given the fact that it's a short week and we don't know for sure whether or not Isaac Guerrero is going to be in or out? Because I know a lot of folks are going to be asking about the 49ers backfield because we know it can be productive at times.
Very productive. You're right. Very productive. We saw even a team like the 49ers who a lot of people are leaving out there for dead. I'm not ready to do that just yet because this division, although the Seahawks are running away with it, this division is still, especially in this divisional game that they have on Thursday, it's going to be an up for grabs division for me. So I'm not gonna say don't roster Patrick Taylor. I think you do in this situation because of the Isaac Guerrero, the foot injury. If you're an Isaac Guerrero manager like myself, I am putting in. I went all in on Isaac Guerrero first of all, so I don't have very much fab budget to spend. But on the couple of dollars that I do, I mean, why not go out there and get Patrick Taylor? I think the play would have been last week to go out there and get him too, but I didn't do it, and I'm happy that I see it now in Cassandra's articles. So it's like, man, now this is the situation where, if Patrick Taylor becomes a guy, or if they start to split carries, because we got to remember Isaac Guerrero has never really been a big, guy as far as getting workload. He's not had that even in college. If you go back and look at he's not getting a big workload, so he's not used to that or not accustomed to that. Not to say he can't do it. I think eventually he could. He's a good sized running back, but Patrick Taylor needs to be out there. He needs to be rostered for sure, 100%.
I think rostering makes some sense, but to your point earlier, I would say Sincere is probably the higher priority head, and then maybe Patrick Taylor like shortly after that. That makes sense to you?
Yes. Yeah. No. That is absolutely like last week. It was Isaac Guerrero was the de facto number one guy. Sincere was being talked about, and even when we came on last time, we talked a little bit about Sincere at that point because I think that was his first game that he just completed, and he didn't do bad. But I think at this point it has to be Sincere number one for me.
That makes sense to me. Okay. All right. So I see a couple questions in the chat. Let's see if we can get to those as quickly as possible. And then we might dive back into some content that we've got here available on the site. Well, we'll just see how the show takes us. But looks like we got one from Lonely Stoner available for us. This is ranked playoffs teams. So PPR: Hurts, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, McLaurin, B-Rob Jr., Kraft, Vidal. Okay. Not sure. So what are we trying? What are we ranking? So rank this playoffs team. Okay. I think this is a strong squad, almost top to bottom, man. I would say though, and I don't know if you've been seeing this tip, but it seems like there's some beef between Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown going on. Like, I don't know how true it is or what the validity is to what we've been seeing posted on social media, but with Jalen Hurts not operating as much as a passer, more of as a runner. We've seen touchdowns go to Grant Calcaterra got in the box on Sunday. Devonta Smith got a touchdown in his first game back. Of course, Saquon Barkley is running roughshod over every defensive front possible. And now we've got, I don't know, like AJ Brown starting to pop up in social media talking about they need to improve on their passing. So I would say that's the only knock on this squad that I would say. But everything else there, I mean, this is one of those playoff, like looking like they can make a deep run in the playoffs just looking at it.
Right. No, I agree. And it is funny, the stack that he got. You probably think of a stack like that at the beginning of the season. You're like, well, I'm gonna coast through the season and possibly make it to the championship. AJ Brown has been a little banged up at times. Yeah, Jamar Chase is Jamar Chase. You don't have to worry about that.
Nope.
McLaurin is starting to come on. But yeah, this little rift that they're having against each other, I think AJ Brown doesn't like to be the number 2, and right now Saquon Barkley is the number 1 guy in this offense. He is the focal point in this offense. AJ Brown was the focal point the last couple of years. I think he is learning how to become not the main guy, and he just needs to, at this point, you're winning games. It's not like you're losing games. If you're on a losing streak, maybe, go out there and say something. I understand the frustration. You want to earn your keep. But I think at this point, man, you just got to let the cards fall where they fall. And look, the team's winning. The team's doing really well, although I think that they should have mollywopped the Carolina Panthers this last week.
A little closer than what we all thought it was going to be.
It's almost like is that rift going to break up the what they're trying to start a cohesive unit. Like the Detroit Lions is a cohesive unit across all fronts.
Yep.
And I think they want to strive to be that, the Philadelphia Eagles. But if you do stuff like this, are you going to break some of that cohesion? That's the question. And I hope that it doesn't, because this is a crucial point, not only for fantasy teams, which, this guy, Lonely Stoner, he has I would say a good solid B team. But I would also say for a reality standpoint, you don't want to mess up any chemistry that they need to work on going forward for the playoff push. That's
great. And I think that's my largest concern. I mean, that's just like the smallest of holes to poke, because we're talking fantasy football here, right? We don't have any sort of insight into what the locker room is, what the locker room environment is for the Eagles or anything along those lines. I mean, all we do know is what we're reading and trying to sift through and analyze the news just as much as the rest of y'all are. So I would say right now, Hurts, QB1, AJ Brown, Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin, a mixture of wide receiver ones, and I would say McLaurin is a very high end wide receiver 2. Brian Robinson Jr., when all things are clicking, is in the high-end running back 2 conversation. Tucker Kraft at least has the workload and a part of at least a decent enough offense that, sure, he can fall into a tight end 1 type of value on a week-in, week-out basis. So I'd say start to finish on that roster. I mean, you're looking fairly strong, but it looks like their follow-up question, which is right below it, asking about either the Chargers D or the Cowboys defense for this upcoming week. I mean, that's something to consider here. I mean, to try and really bring this entire squad home, because the Chargers, like this week, they go up against Tampa Bay. Cowboys after the loss just past week, and also with losing, was it Demarion Overshot? Yeah, Overshot. They do face the Carolina Panthers this upcoming week, and with the Panthers playing so well, I could go in either direction. I think I lean a bit more towards the Chargers, just because you do have the Chargers offense, or not Chargers offense, the Bucks offense, which with Baker Mayfield throwing the ball, they have over this past couple of weeks, Baker has thrown a few picks here and there. Chargers can limit opposing running games. And then also with the potential of them not having Bucky Irving on the field, I can see the Chargers limiting what the Bucks want to do as compared to what Dallas could have potentially done fully healthy against Bryce Young. I think I lean the Chargers in this one, but do you look at this one any differently?
I want to say Chargers, because the fact of the matter is they're one of the slowest paced teams out there. They don't give up a lot of points. Every time it's a grinded out game for them for the most part, unless they're playing the Cincinnati Bengals or the Baltimore Ravens. It's been a slow grinded out game for teams. So I want to say the Chargers. My thing is, are the sacks, because I know I'm going to get sacks from the Cowboys. I know that Michael Parsons is going to give me those sacks. They just got their secondary fully back. Yesterday was the first time this season we even saw DeJuan Bland on as well. So True. That last year, that guy, the way he played, I want to take a shot on them against a team. Yes, the Carolina Panthers have been playing great this last stretch of the season, and I will say this. I think that their offense is better. I just don't know if it's going to be that much better than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And I'll say it this way. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are one of those teams that like to run and gun it. They like to get the ball down the field. You got Mike Evans. You got you got Rashad White as well. You got McMillan coming on as last week too. So it's kind of like, do I want to play the team that is going to be slow and methodical? Yes. But my question would be, how the sacks, and I'm going to look at what their sacks is because I always know I'm going to get at least pressure with Michael Parsons. I know that, and I know Overshown that situation it's going to hurt them. But I always look for those not necessarily takeaways or turnovers or pick sixes. I want to get a bunch of sacks, and that's for me. So looking at, let's see, the Chargers. The Chargers, they actually have been pretty decent in the sack category. I mean, you look at last week against Kansas City, they got 3. They've got a couple of games with just 1. They've got a couple of games with 7 and 6. So it might not be a bad shot, but Tampa Bay's offensive line, I mean, I looked at their PFF offensive line. They're a top 10 offensive line right now. They've been really, really good. So this is going to be a fun one to watch, but I'm going to lean just a little bit more towards the Cowboys.
I think you changed my mind, like thinking about how this, how the Panthers' offensive line could go up against the Cowboys' defensive front. And even without Overshown, we could see more potential for some sacks. And you pointed out like Jalen McMillan for the Bucs. I was thinking more about Mike Evans and Cade Otton and the lack of, or not potentially not having Bucky Irving. But now it's like with Jalen McMillan coming on this past week and that other option for Baker Mayfield, might see a limited, or the Chargers defense into their upside and the number of sacks they could generate might be somewhat limited. So I guess I agree with you now. The slightest leans towards Cowboys D, but to be quite honest with you, I don't think you could go wrong in either direction, but I think we'll both lean in Cowboys D for week 15. But all right, folks, I mean, y'all know the deal. Week 15, trying to set your waivers right. Myself, Chris Allen, Tip Major with me as well in order to talk about like what we're going on from a roster standpoint. But even if you're not thinking about changes to your roster for this week, let's also think about week 15 or week 16 and beyond, right? We're trying to think about how it's going to set you up to make that championship run. But of course, we'll be here for the next few weeks to try and usher you through. But now trying to make sure you're making the changes that you need to your roster so that you're set up not just for this week, but week 16 and all the rest of that stuff so that your roster is completely tied up and locked in for the championship run. That's what we're here to do. So check out the website, FantasyLife.com. Get your tier 2 subscription so you have access to stuff like the utilization report, all the analysis that we do here at Fantasy Life, and make sure you have that access so that it's not just us answering the questions. You can get a look at some of the tools we use on a day-to-day basis. But all right, I see a couple more questions in the chat. Let's see. It looks like we got one from Jay Money. Again, some more defensive questions. This is going to probably be a lot. I mean, I think people really do get down into the nitty gritty for the playoffs. Where I'll be surprised, or let's see, I won't be surprised if we get kicker questions. To be honest with you, Tip. But let's see, what's Jay Money got for us? So hold Arizona defense versus New England, or add Denver, the Jets, the Falcons, or the Chiefs. So I'm looking at like Arizona's defense, and first I would have said no. I mean, that's not. I don't really care about Arizona's defense, but they've played really well over the past month or so. It does seem like Jonathan Gannon has been trying to at least get most of that unit in shape, even without as many playmakers on their roster as possible. But I wouldn't be as confident starting them up against Drake May, especially with the Patriots coming off of coming off their bye, looked good going into their bye. And I would probably look towards one of those 4. Denver going up. Denver plays against Indianapolis. The Jets, even after the L that they just took this past week, they get to play the Jaguars. Atlanta's going up against Atlanta faces the Raiders, and then the Chiefs face Cleveland. I would say out of that group, the Jets facing Jacksonville is the one that sticks out the most to me. But is there any other defense that you think would probably be a better option over Arizona?
I think you got to be careful, but it's the Denver one going against the Colts, because we saw, what Anthony Richardson can really do in this offense. So that is the one thing. We didn't see it last week, but the week before that, with the comeback victory that he had, and he was running, he was scoring points, and so you got to be careful. But this Denver defense has been really, really nasty as of late, especially getting sacked. So I'm looking towards sacks. I like the going against Jacksonville Jaguars. I like that. That's another one as well, because Jacksonville has not been scoring points. And then the other one was, I'm not gonna go with the Cardinals one, just because their offense has been struggling, and that's something you have to look at as well. You have to look at, is the offense struggling because that's going to eventually get my defense tired. The Denver Broncos offense is not struggling. The Jets offense is not struggling, but they're also not really stopping people on the defensive end. That Atlanta one is intriguing because they are playing Desmond Ridder. Now, Desmond Ridder could have a little bit of or they could be playing him. We don't know yet because AOC, the injury wasn't as bad, and that's Aiden O'Connell. His injury wasn't as bad as what they eventually feared. So that if AOC is good, then I'm not playing against Atlanta. But if Ridder is out there, I might sneak Atlanta in there. But for me right now, it's Denver 100% out of those.
I can see the case for Denver. My only concern would be just what Anthony Richardson can do as a runner, and if the Broncos really do have a plan for containing him. And so with both teams, both teams are coming out of their bye, they've had extra time to try and plan, punch, counter punch. I know what you know, what I know, what that sort of thing. It could be one of those back and forth types of matchups where we could see Anthony Richardson have a good game. I'd say the only other one, and I mentioned it earlier, the Jets playing against Jacksonville. They are top 5 in pressure rate so far throughout the season. So the potential for, we were talking earlier about, we're not looking for just the turnovers and all that. We're looking for sacks, a way to rack up some of the points from a defensive standpoint. So I could see a scenario where the Jets do try and break through the Jaguars offensive line, and they wind up taking down Mac Jones a few times here and there throughout the game. So that'd be the only other one that really sticks out to me. And if you want to go high variance, Chiefs, they can get a few sacks on Jameis Winston. We just saw the Steelers do the exact same thing to the Browns this past week. And of course, with the way Jameis plays, the Lord has had, he hasn't been able to deliver him from them picks. He did deliver him from the pick sixes, but an interception or two could definitely be in the cards. So I would say Chiefs, and then probably the Jets are probably right up there. Probably right up there for me. Just looking how the way that the offenses that they'll be facing, the way they operate, do kind of lend themselves for at least a turnover or two and a number of sacks as well. But, all right, let's go ahead and keep things moving. I think I saw another one from Jay Money as well as a follow-up question. We'll see what we got here. So let's say drop Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis for Patrick Taylor, Sincere McCormick or Sean Tucker in half PPR. So he's got at least a fairly good stable of running backs. Kamara, Tracy, Dowdle, Bucky, Brees, Allen. Okay. All right. So let's just look at the Jets situation. Would you want to drop either of Braylon Allen or Isaiah Davis at this point? Just forget about the other guys that is listed there.
Yeah.
But looking at the way that how much they were used on Sunday, how productive they were, or are you still looking to hold both of them, or would you want to drop either of them at this point?
It's so tough because I want to play one of these guys, right? But the fact of the matter is, Chris, that the Jets are not running the ball. They have not done it all season long. They are the team with the fewest rushing attempts on the season at 21 rushing attempts a game. It's just really, really tough. And they've been doing this with Brees Hall. They've been doing it with Braylon Allen. Isaiah Davis just came into the mix. All of these guys are big running backs. All of these guys are 215-plus pound running backs that can run. Some of them can catch really well. Some of them can run and catch and run through brick walls. And they're just not doing it. I don't understand why this team's not running the ball effectively. So if you're going to go ahead and do it, I think Isaiah Davis is the one that you would go ahead and let go of at this point. Although he's been getting it done, even in catching, he's been getting it done. I think if you really want to let go of one of these guys, it's him. And I would definitely go with the Sincere McCormick. Although it's really funny. In Cassandra's article, all of these running backs are in there. That's so cool. That's crazy.
There.
Yeah.
I think
all of them.
Kendall did an excellent job outlining all of that.
Yeah.
But looking at this list, I guess I'm not sure where the upgrade is, and that's the way that I'm looking at it. So Sincere, he lines up as the running back that has the most direct path to touches. But when we talked earlier, like Patrick Taylor, we're assuming Isaac Orendo is potentially going to play, even though it's on a short week, so it's going to be a crowded backfield. Taylor's not going to be the RB1 with the information we know right now. Sean Tucker, of course, Bucky Irving re-aggravated the back hip injury, potentially going to miss week 15, but still he's going to be competing with Rachaad White for touches. This is also in more of a pass-first type of offense, and while Sean Tucker's mixed in for a few targets here and there, we can't really project the type of role that would really put him into even a mid-range RB2 type of position. So really, it's just Sincere out of that group that lines up as the guy that, all right, if I'm going to drop one of these two relatively productive running backs, I would be also replacing him with a relatively productive running back.
Right.
So if you want to make that decision, I can understand going for Sincere, but the other guys, yeah, I would stay away. I would just hold both Jets running backs at this point if you have to, versus trying to pick up any one of those other three other than Sincere. I would drop one of the Jets guys for Sincere, but that's about it.
Right.
All right.
Chris,
So
let me ask you a question. What are your thoughts on what the Jets have done in the run game? I mean, we all know the Aaron Rodgers thing. We all get it. We all understand that they wanted to throw the ball more than it. But I mean, what are your thoughts been on that? Because it's been a disappointment all year.
I think it's more about not just how they're using the running game, but just the offensive situation in general.
Okay.
Because what was it? Last on Sunday was the first game since 2021 that Aaron Rodgers has thrown for more than 300 yards. And while they've been more of a pass-first type offense, it hasn't really led to the efficiencies to get their running backs into the red zone to give them the touches that they would need in order to really pay off any draft cost, or we would want to have them on our benches or our rosters to begin with. So we have a one-game sample against the Dolphins where Rodgers performs well, and now the entire offense looks good. And looking at their upcoming schedule, yes, they get Jacksonville, but then after that they get the Rams, and then they get Buffalo. So can Aaron Rodgers bring this offense and make this offense more efficient? That's the real question.
That's the question. That's a good
one. So like this upcoming week against the Jaguars, okay, cool. I can see another scenario where the entire offense clicks. Both Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen would be viable running backs to roster and potentially start, depending on what your other options are. I can see that happening. But in week 16 and 17, when you're really going to need just like zero questions, you're going to need like the least amount of uncertainty about your roster because you want everything tight. That's where I have more questions, not even about the running backs. It's just that how that entire offense is going to operate. Because when Aaron Rodgers is bad, it brings the whole squad down.
Everything.
And that's where I have a few more questions about it. So like I could see dropping a guy for Sincere because we know he's going to get all the work. And I'm cool with that.
Right.
You know, but like for the Jets in general, it's not just about how they're using the running backs. It's about how Aaron Rodgers is going to perform over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Right.
Okay. Let's keep it moving right along. I think I saw another question real quick. Let's see what we got. One from Carl. See, starting Scary Terry, Jennings, and flexing Higgins. I mean, that's dope. You can flex T. Higgins. I mean, daggone. DK, Patrick Taylor, and Harris on the bench. What are y'all thinking? I mean, would you really put in, let's see, DK Metcalf, Patrick Taylor, or Najee Harris, like for any one of these guys? I say no, and here's why. DK Metcalf right now, with whatever the injuries are or how that offense has been performing, it's been performing better with JSN being the focal point of that offense, and with Zach Charbonnet also mixing in with Kenneth Walker. And we don't know how long Kenneth Walker is going to be in. I don't think DK is a priority start at this point. Patrick Taylor, we already talked about. Najee Harris, actually on Sunday, Najee Harris was one of his first games in quite some time where he had 0 targets. He was behind Jaylen Warren in rushing attempts as well. Jaylen Warren looked like the better running back between the two Steelers RBs. So I don't really see any player, wide receiver or running back, that you would need to force into your lineup over Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver 1 for his team, Jawan Jennings, the wide receiver 1 for his team, and then T. Higgins, even with the dud last night, the wide receiver 1B on his team. I wouldn't want to force any one of those guys onto my starting roster, but do you think there's a case for anybody else, like any DK, Patrick Taylor, or Najee Harris?
Yeah, it's unfortunate because DK Metcalf was a guy that I was really, really, gravitating towards this offseason. And I know the injuries have caught up to him because I feel like if he was fully healthy, we would be seeing a different DK Metcalf. But I can't do it. And then Najee Harris, I like Najee Harris because you know what you're going to get from him. You're always going to get really close to or right at or maybe a little bit over 10 points. It's never going to be a big spike week. I mean, he'll have those from time to time, but consistently you're going to get right around 10 points with him. And that's just what he does. He's a grinder. Yes, I do agree with you as far as Jaylen Warren getting back into the mix, getting healthy. He's starting to get some run as well. They needed him a little bit more in the past game because of George Pickens being out, and it's sounding like George Pickens is probably going to be out this week too. So it might be more of the same thing that we see with Jaylen Warren. So I think that the way he has it is good. You just can't trust DK Metcalf at this point.
Yeah, I'm kind of
tough.
with you on that one. And besides, you've got high-end options at every other spot currently with
Right.
McLaurin, Jennings, and Higgins. So no need to force the volatility from any of those other guys onto your roster. All right, let's keep it going. See a few more questions like popping up in the chat. And again, appreciate y'all stopping by. So this one's from Cal from Fresno. Started DK and James Cook. Now I'm saying, oh man, so you really need to pop off this week. I'd say again, starting with your current roster, I would prefer to keep the guys you currently have on your starting roster in those plays. And of course, I mean, DK can be somewhat volatile, but I think it's just more the health concerns and where JSN right now currently is the pecking order that would keep him as their wide receiver one for right now. Okay, what else we got going on here? Let's see a few more questions in the chat. Let's see this from Greg. DST, another DST question. What DST opponent would you prioritize for week 16 and 17? Would the Giants be the best? Falcons play the Giants in week 16, Colts play Giants in week 17, and the other DST opponents to target. Well, let's see. Those do definitely stand out. I've mentioned this. I think I mentioned this on last week's show. The Titans, even though they did wind up getting beat up just this past week, and they took yet another L. The Titans, they do have Cincinnati in week 15, then they have the Colts and then Jacksonville in week 17. Not bad. I mean, that would be another potential streamer that you could target just based off the matchups to look at. Because I'm assuming most of these other defenses are probably scooped up. Seattle, if you want to try and take a look at them as well, like Seattle's probably been picked up since they've been playing well over the past couple of weeks. Tough matchups over the next couple of weeks, but in week 17, they do face the Bears. A couple other ones. So that's at least two that you could take a look at. But out of that group, do you think any one of those guys, like the Giants, would you want to pick up them? Or do you have anybody else that you're thinking of? That might be an option.
I don't want to touch any of the Giants, play other than Tracy. Tracy's really the only guy. Maybe Malik Neighbors. The only thing is, he's got to get healthy as well. I'm looking at the Washington Commanders, and I'm pretty sure at least they're 30% rostered in Sleeper right now. Mm-hmm. They play the New Orleans Saints this week.
And then they got the Falcons in week 17. Then they got
the Falcons in week 17, and then Dallas in week 18 if you go that far. Mm-hmm. But week 16, you got to worry about Philly. Sure. But yeah, look, this Commanders team, they are probably going to have to play against Haney this week because Derek Carr is out. And so now they can focus in or put their focus in on Alvin Kamara and really start to hone in on this and try to get some turnovers. So I think it's in New Orleans. So that's always a tough matchup, anytime you go to the Big Easy. But I do think that the Commanders would be a team that I would look at. If I'm going to really have to go with anybody in this group, I would maybe go the Falcons, but They just haven't been good at all. You're just trying to go against them because they're an inferior opponent. But are they really inferior? Because the Falcons just have not been good at all late.
Okay. I get it now. The Greg is saying, I see is the follow-up. It said target defenses playing against the Giants. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. If you're going to prioritize defenses facing the Giants offense, 100%. Malik Neighbors and Tyrone Tracy, to your point, Tip, are pretty much the only options that most defenses would fear and the only options that we might consider rostering from a fantasy standpoint. So looking at their upcoming schedule, Baltimore, they got the Falcons, they have the Colts over the next 3 weeks. So I'm assuming Ravens might be rostered. They may or may not be rostered just because they're bye week and because their secondary has been something of a problem. But Atlanta and the Colts, I think those would legitimately be options to take up. So I'm definitely with that if you can't find any better streaming options. So appreciate the follow-up, Greg, on that one. Okay, let's keep things moving. Again, we got maybe another 20-ish minutes or so. So we'll try and get to as many questions as we can. Again, appreciate everybody stopping by, dropping some questions into it. And of course, Greg, look at Got that bye week. Look at him go. Look at him go. Man,
well, Greg, go out there and look and see if the Commanders are available because that's going to be a hot team this week because they're going against that Saints, and we don't know who the starting quarterback's going to be. So.
I definitely agree with that one. A tough matchup in week 16, but over the next two out of the next 3 solid matchups for the Commanders. All right, so this one's from Rod Richardson or Stafford or Jameis Winston.
Ooh.
Now, Jameis Winston has to go up against the Kansas City defense. Matthew Stafford, after putting up, 42 points, at least the Rams did in total. The Rams faced the 49ers. That's on, they got the short week on TNF. Richardson, coming out of his bye, goes up against the Denver Broncos. I think out of that group, I lean Matthew Stafford. That is my initial lean for just looking at how well the Rams offense has been able to play, how great Stafford has been able to operate, even when he has been under pressure. I would probably take his outlook over Richardson and Winston, but do you see it differently too?
I'm looking at Winston is kind of out there for me because of the Kansas City Chiefs. We just talked about how the Chargers play really slow. The Kansas City Chiefs play just as slow, and they try to hold on to the ball, and it's just going to be a really tough slushy, muck it out game. So I'm not going to go with Winston. I like Richardson's upside with the running, but I think it's Matthew Stafford here. He's hot right now, man, and this team needs to win. It could be a potential shootout on Thursday night. Both teams are coming off of a hard fought. Well, at least the Rams came off of a hard fought win. The 49ers kind of beat up on the Bears, but the thing is, it's still, they played Sunday. A lot of those players are a little banged up, so that could play a piece into it. So I think that could be a big of a shootout. So I'm going to go Matthew Stafford just a little bit slightly, just because I think it's going to be a little bit more of a high scoring game.
I can agree with that. The only other caveat, now I'm thinking about this question a bit more, is that go over the rest of your roster, and if you really think that you need the upside, I could see you leaning towards Anthony Richardson, with as well as he's been able to perform as a passer over this past couple of, 2, 3, 4 weeks or so since he came back and replaced Flacco. And we've seen a bit more from him as a passer. And of course, the rushing upside is also there. So if you're thinking you might need the upside, just looking at the rest of your roster, I could see you going in the direction of Anthony Richardson. I think as of right now, I would say that Matthew Stafford is the best out of that bunch, because we know that Winston is prone to taking sacks, throwing an interception or two, and with going up against the Chiefs as well, it's going to be a tough outlook for Jameis Winston. I'd say it's between Stafford or Richardson. I'd say Stafford provides the floor with something of a ceiling, because we just saw that on Sunday, but still, I'd say it's between those two, and I'd say Winston is probably a cut below the other two. All right. So again, appreciate everybody for dropping in and giving us some of your questions. We're trying to got maybe another 10-ish minutes or so before we get on out of here. If we don't answer your questions today, check out FantasyLife.com. Have plenty of we've already walked through Kendall Valenzuela's wonderful waiver wire article for Week 15. Has most of the priority ads. We've got our waiver wire tool that's also available on the site that gives you a sense of, from us internally, looking at their the utilization and also their outlook for Week 15. We do try and rank them and say, like, okay, these are the more higher priority guys versus some of the other players that might or might not be ones that you want to pick up and try and roster for Week 15 or throughout the rest of the playoffs. So all of that stuff is available for you on the site. Tier 2 subscription gets you access to the utilization report. So our wonderful Dwayne McFarland has all the game logs, the utilization report score, all that stuff that would really, really help you out, especially in a time where you're going to need as much information as possible to make the right decisions for your roster. So again, FantasyLife.com. Check out all that stuff. We've got a bunch more questions in the chat. Like I said, 10-ish more minutes or so before we get on out of here. But let's see what else we've got going on before we get on out of here today. Let's see. I think I've seen a couple from, I see one from Mark. I see one from Roger. I mean, it's dealer's choice this way. We'll see what we got. So this one from Mark. Purdy or Matt Stafford for Week 15? Again, both quarterbacks that happen to be facing each other on Thursday Night Football. I would say, just off the top of my head, without really looking at, I lean towards Matt Stafford. Again, that would be my first cut. Just thinking about it. We do realize that Purdy has looked well coming off of the shoulder injury a couple weeks ago, but just if you've got Puka Nacua, if you've got Cooper Kupp, and of course Kyron Williams can also operate as a pass catcher as well, going against San Francisco's defense. I like his outlook a bit more as compared to Brock Purdy, where the Rams defense, they have been fairly stout. Of course they gave up a bunch of points to Josh Allen as a rusher, but I would say that looking at Purdy's outlook versus Stafford. I lean a bit more towards Stafford, but do you think Purdy is the better of the two options here?
I know this is hard for me because you got to look back at what Purdy did against the Rams last time they played, and the Rams better have that on tap too, because that's when Jauan Jennings made a name of himself, and everybody's been chasing that ever since then. So I lean Stafford on this one. I lean Stafford on this one too, though. I'm with you. I think that Stafford has just got the better. He's got the better weaponry. I know you got George Kittle. You still got Deebo Samuel, who has actually been really, really terrible these last few weeks, man. I hope it's not the end of Deebo, man, because he's been so fun to watch. But it's one of those situations where teams aren't stopping Puka Nacua. Teams are barely stopping. They're just now getting to stop Cooper Kupp. You got Kyron Williams as well coming out of the backfield. He's got a lot more weapons. I'm going to go Matthew Stafford. I think it's not close for me. I think everybody's going to be chasing that Purdy. I think he's going to play well, but I just think that this is going to be more.
Well, I think that's yeah, and I think just looking at the options that that Stafford has, I mean, you just listed all of them. Like, we will want to have Jauan Jennings on our rosters, want to have George Kittle on our rosters, and then some sort of like either it's Isaac Orendo or folks going to be stashing Patrick Taylor. But again, looking at that matchup, I think Stafford is the better of those two. But again, short week. Let's see how things shake out. And of course, when it comes to Thursday Night Football, and of course, it's going to be a divisional rematch. It's tough to really project ceiling outcomes from any of those types of players. But again, just looking at it, I think Matthew Stafford, with the way he's been operating so far, those are the guys. That's the guy that you want to have out of that particular matchup. But all right, so let's keep things moving right along. This one's from Roger. Bucky or Jauan Jennings in the flex, Ertz or Ferguson, tight end, 12-man PPR. Thank you. Well, you're welcome. At least welcome in advance. I mean, the first part's easy because I'm assuming Bucky's not going to play this week. But that's my first inclination. So you would want to have Jauan Jennings in your flex anyway. But Jauan Jennings is the wide receiver one for the 49ers. With the way he's been used so far, I mean, 30% target share in his first week back from that hip pointer, and that was with Christian McCaffrey on the field. 20% in almost every game so far of the past like 5 weeks or so since he's been back. I'd say he's probably even if Bucky was active, I would probably go him over Jennings, just with the way that the hip and back injury that Bucky sustained a couple weeks ago. Jennings is probably the better of the two anyway. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, Jennings is the one that I would go for in this one. I hate to say you have to do it, but you have to chase what he did last week or last time they played the Rams, and what he's been doing over the course of the time that he's been on the field. And the number one guy, like you said, you got to keep going with Jauan Jennings. Brock Purdy has been looking for him or looking towards his way even last year in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl. Jauan Jennings was the guy that he was going to, and he's got a familiarity and a comfort level with him, and now it's starting to show even more. So that's good in of itself. For me on the Zach Ertz versus the Ferguson, I went back and looked at this one, and it's really hard to trust Ferguson now without Dak Prescott in there. I'm going Ertz all the way on this one. I think that Zach Ertz he is the second read. He is the second option. Now you don't have any more Austin Eckler. He's on IR, so he is the second read for the Commanders after Terry McLaurin. So I think he is a guy that you have to go. It's a better offense as well. So I think that you have to continue to go with Zach Ertz.
I completely agree. Honestly, I thought you were going to go Ferguson and we were going to have to duke it out for a second, but I'm with you on Ertz. He's had a top 10 in targets per game at the tight end position, like well ahead of Jake Ferguson so far this season. And to your point, it's not like we're rushing out to pick up Noah Brown or any of the Olamide Zaccheaus or any of the other wide receivers for Washington. It really is just Terry McLaurin, it's Zach Ertz, and Jane Daniels from a passing standpoint. Right. So I don't see really any necessity to rostering a guy like Jake Ferguson, where, again, he's playing with the backup quarterback, one, and has multiple pass catchers ahead of him. He's got CD, Jalen Tolbert still mixing in. Brandon Cooks got a touchdown just last night against my Bengals, and multiple wide receivers ahead, or at least working in tandem with Jake Ferguson, whereas there are fewer guys ahead or working alongside Zach Ertz. So I think it's an easy route for Zach Ertz in this one. So Jauan Jennings in the flex, Zach Ertz in your tight end position, you're going to lock up a win for week 15, my man. All right, JTB, Washington or Cardinals D for this week? I mean, look at it. I think you already talked about Washington's defense.
Yeah,
so I think we're both on the Washington train. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. It's look, anytime you get to play a backup or even a backup, like you gotta go for it, man, on a defense, because and it could come back and bite you. But I just really have a feeling that they're rested. They're coming off their rest week or bye week, so now they're gonna be ready to go after them.
Yeah, Washington top 12 in pressure rate like over the season, and that's ramped up over the last 6 weeks or so as Dan Quinn has really started to implement his type of scheme or like the way he wants to run defenses. And I think, and I double checked the reports, but I thought this was going to be the debut for Marshawn Lattimore.
Oh, that would be even bigger.
Over from New Orleans like to Washington, so that's just another level for Washington. So I would say I'd give the edge to Washington this week, but Cardinals D has been playing well, but I do think that Washington has like the better outlook for week 15 versus, I mean, the Cardinals, they could do well from a passing standpoint, but Drake May could scramble and essentially do his light version of Josh Allen and wind up putting up a few points to keep the Cardinals D down. All right, let's see what else we got. Again, maybe 5-10-ish minutes or probably less than 10 minutes to go before we got to get out of here. But from JTB, Metcalf or Amari Cooper? Josh Allen is my QB. All right, so let's see. Looking at Josh Allen and trying to stack him with Amari Cooper, I was actually pretty encouraged with how Amari Cooper was used this past week from an air yardage standpoint and the amount of targets he was getting, actually starting to compete with Khalil Shakir. My only concern would be like, will the Bills be pushed into that type of pass heavy type of script again? That would be my general concern. But with what we were talking about with DK Metcalf earlier, JSN getting used a bit more, DK Metcalf mixing in for 5 or 6 targets. We're not really seeing those deep shots or that we were seeing earlier in the year. I think Amari Cooper just in week 15 might be the better option. But do you think that we should still be looking at Metcalf as the wide receiver 1 that we thought he was going to be coming into 2024?
Oh, man. I want to say give him one more week, guys. I really do. But I've been saying that for 2 weeks now. So I don't know if I could do it anymore, especially week 15. This is playoff time. I mean, you're going to need points from all of your players, not just, a blow-up week. So I think you got to go with Cooper. It sucks to say it because, again, I am a big DK Metcalf fan. I just think the injuries have caught up to him. Big on him because he's out there playing amongst whatever ailments he's having. He's doing what he needs to do to be on the football field. Unfortunately, it's just not doing anything for us, man, as far as fantasy goes.
Yeah, and I think JTB, you're right, man. The second that we put him on the bench, that's what, because honestly, like I benched. Nobody cares about my fantasy teams, but I did bench DK Metcalf this past week, but I benched him for Juwan Jennings and Jordan Addison. That worked out right for this past week, but who's to say it's going to be the same case in week 15? So I completely understand.
Chris, I played him because I was hoping that he was going to get matched up with Sean Murphy-Bunting, and I haven't looked back at the reports. I'm gonna check. I'm gonna watch the film actually because they were saying if he's going to be on Garrett Williams, then don't even bother. But if he's going to be on with Sean Murphy-Bunting, then you might want to give DK Metcalf a shot. So I know they move DK Metcalf a lot. They move him around across the board. So I understand that. So I was thinking maybe they're going to get some mismatches with him, and it just didn't happen again, man. So
So that's the tough one. All right, one more question, then we got to go out. All right, let's see how quickly we can get through this one. Would we still take James Cook over Najee Harris with Josh Allen taking all of his TDs? I still say yes. Yeah, because we're not seeing as much from Ray Davis and any of the rest of the running backs from there. So, yes, Josh Allen is always going to be a problem, but I would prefer Josh Allen to be the problem to James Cook versus another running back being a problem, which is definitely the case for Najee Harris. But do you see it differently?
No, I agree with you 100%. It's like you know what you have in Josh Allen. You know what he's going to give you. You drafted James Cook, and you knew you were going to get touchdowns taken away with him. And that's just something you're going to have to deal with. But, yeah, I'd rather have that than the other way around.
Yeah, I don't think it's always going to be the case. I mean, Josh Allen is always going to be a thorn in the side to any potential running back, but it might have been just a 1 week thing where they were trying to play up tempo. They were trying to have mount this comeback effort against the Rams. I don't think this is going to be an every week thing where he steals all of the goal line work for James Cook. But again, that's the deal that you signed when you drafted James Cook. But I'd say still a better option over Najee Harris. All right, y'all. Again, appreciate everybody for stopping by. This week 15, get your roster set. Make sure you have all this stuff. But if we didn't answer your questions today, check out FantasyLife.com. But before I let you go, Tip, I mean, pimp whatever you got, man. Like, where's your content at? How can the folks find you?
Yeah, so I'm with Football Guys now, so I'm actually writing an article today, and that should be out. Look out for that one. And I'm also doing content for the sports affiliation. I do a show with Greg Kellogg. And then I also do an article that you should be. It's a niche article. It's usually about the Scott Fish Bowl and return yardage players. So it's a fun one. And then I'm also on 32-bit. I do a show with Natter on Thursday nights. We're going to be doing that one. But yeah, I'm all over the map.
Excellent, man. I appreciate you stopping by again. So for myself, Chris, for Tip, for producer Paul, thanks everybody for stopping.